Didn't say it yet though. Oh, this ain't out on there. It's live. We're live. What's going on?
A lot has been going on. I think
Is
I
it
need
good
to
or
switch
bad?
it. Yeah, yeah, it's for good actually. Um, I got promoted at work.
Felicitaciones. That's what's up. Well, that's
Yes, so
congratulations in Spanish.
that's cool. Now I have my own team of developers, and we're actually building a product.
Yeah.
So it's not just a product; it's a group of products. Let me send you the URL. I think the first one is Nigawela. That's the first one. It has two applications, Surfwella and Laughwella. So, so these three are the applications that my unit is in charge of building and all that. And it's a pain. It's not a pain. It's actually enjoyable because at least you get to use all the latest fancy technology, Azure, Service Fabric, whatever. But it's not easy, especially when you are starting out. Okay, building all the infrastructure, setting up, laying out everything, like having a continuous build, continuous integration, continuous deployment, setting all of that up. It's just it's a big undertaking to say the least.
Well, I thought continuous integration was fairly like plug and play or snap and play. No.
Okay, so yes, to a large extent, especially with Visual Studio Team Services. In fact, I'm just impressed with the whole Microsoft offering for cloud, for that whole stuff. But there's a lot that goes into it, having staging servers, having production servers, managing application secrets between the production and the staging, having, of course, so the pipeline of this is we have continuous deployment all the way to staging server. So once a developer writes code and checks it in, it gets built, tests get run, etc. But ultimately, it lands in the staging application. So that staging application is where QA steps in, they vet like UI tests and all that. And once that's done, somebody has to now approve for that particular build to get into release, or the latest build to get into release. So organizing that, setting that up, it was it's not uh, it's not easy. But the good part is
Very, very orchestrated. No.
yeah, very orchestrated, very orchestrated. So yeah, in fact, some of the real difficulty we've been facing. So okay, let me just explain what the two platforms are doing. Right? So the software is like free internet. We're giving out free internet to places in Lagos, public spots where people don't really have access to internet. And over here, internet is quite expensive. So part of the goal is to make internet more available, but at the same time, how we are going to make money from it is using ads. So what happens is periodically, once you're surfing on the web, periodically, I think after every 30 minutes or so, we would log out the browsing session, you would see an ad, then you log in again.
That's annoying.
So yeah,
Ah,
but trust me, you know, it's better than having no internet whatsoever.
yeah.
Yeah, it's better than, yeah, especially when you know internet is even expensive. So even when you do have it, it's either not performant or it's expensive. So that's our way of trying to solve that. That's software. Laughwella on the other, that one is quite challenging, but it's not really a big deal per se. Where the big deal is in the Laughwella. It's a funny video site, very similar to YouTube. So imagine they asked you to build YouTube from scratch.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into YouTube, like as a video service. Like one of the things that people don't really know, but is, in fact, okay, to put it, we had very, very interesting discussions. Like the marketing team came and told us, we want you to build a video website. It's going to be like YouTube. It's just made for free videos and all that. How long will it take to build it? We told them 6 years.
Yeah.
They were like, 6 years, what's there? I can get someone that will just put a video up there, and it shouldn't be
Think
that
about all
hard.
the features that YouTube provides. YouTube provides
Exactly.
editing features. They provide YouTube Live. They provide tools for understanding your who's viewing your content, or SEO optimization or something to that effect. Like, yeah, I totally get it. 6 years.
Even 6 years, yeah. Even something as simple as adaptive streaming, you'd be surprised how hard that is. That is incredibly difficult. In fact, right now we don't have adaptive streaming, and that's what we're looking at doing. But the time in terms of research and development is just astronomical, because getting adaptive streaming to work means, having, first of all, the encoding. When someone uploads a video, you don't expect them to upload it in a format that you approve. They should be able to upload it in any format that they choose. And not only would you have to detect that format, but you have to now encode it at different resolutions. So 2240, 480, 720, 1080, and so on. And then having all those parallel streams allow such that you're detecting the network. Once there's a latency, you switch between the 240 and the 480, and so on and so forth. Now, you and I are technical people, so we know that there is a lot involved in it, but the marketing guys don't seem to get how incredibly hard the problem is. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey. At least, if not for anything, I'm learning really quickly a lot of new technologies in that space.
So how far away are you from burning out?
Yeah, in fact, I had to close work early today because I just felt sick. I close around, earliest 8, 9 o'clock because I'm a manager now, and I'm now stuck with both the devilish timelines of what the management and the our customers are expecting, versus technical debt and having to do the right thing. Balancing that is just so painful, and unfortunately I'm caught in the crossfire. But my goal is to automate as much of that shit as possible. Can I curse? Sorry about that.
No, I get you.
Yeah,
Don't apologize.
To automate the hell out of everything. So I've already even started, some of which I already got for free. For example, Application Insights. Have you used Application Insights before?
No, I've heard of it, but I haven't really used it.
Oh my god, I know I like superlatives a lot, but okay, let me paint a scenario. I wake up, okay, I come to work in the morning, I open Visual Studio, I launch the application, and Visual Studio tells me that a particular function is causing problems in production. And it not tells me that, it tells me the frequency in which that problem happened in production. It said it happened on Saturday at 10 p.m. 15 people sent a request to this URL and it failed. And this is the method that caused the failure. This is the stack trace of the failure. This is the exception that caused that failure.
Doesn't happen now.
So, but that is like God level of information. That kind of a thing. So it's just a few lines, really. It's just a few lines of code in your ASP.NET Core application, just like a few lines of code in the application itself, and some JavaScript on the page, and that's it. You're done. But the amount of telemetry they can pull out of that is just amazing. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know? And not only that, like periodically every week they send you a report. Part of my KPI is to generate a report of all the different platforms, how they are doing, response times, whether they are improving or not, page views, rank, SEO, all this kind of stuff, right? Apparently, Application Insights already does that for you. So they collate all that data weekly, they send you a report. So my job is just to forward, it to my bosses, and life is good. So my goal is to automate as much of it as possible, and maybe I will now have, the stress will reduce a lot.
You automate it or your team? Does your team have the same vision that you have in regards to automate everything and remove the as much human error as possible in regards to manual intervention?
Steve Jobs said something. Steve Jobs said, A players like to work with A players.
Goddamn right.
B players, yes, B players only like to work with C players. C players only like to work with D players. And what ends up happening is that's how a company becomes a bunch of bozos, according to him.
And that's how you become deemed as not a cultural fit. That's the way I interpret it. But okay, so you said that. So what does that mean based on the question I asked?
Yeah, so what it means is, he also said something. He said that an A team will run laps around the B team. So my team were very small, just 3 guys, but like we are in sync. You have no idea, like, we are perfectly in sync. And I think that
Navy SEALs.
Yeah. So if something gets by me, I have someone else who can just step in and just quickly fix whatever issue, or but we all in the same page, automate everything, test everything. We all believe in continuous delivery, continuous improvement, etc. So yeah, that's what gets me excited to work, because I work with a very good team.
That's good. My question is, how did you, and I understand that you're talking about your current job, and so maybe you can't really provide details, and that's okay, but I'm still going to ask, how did you get your team, how did you build your team to be like that? How did you prevent ordinary developers that don't have that vision, that don't have that diligence? How did you prevent them from them being inserted into your team?
So the way I did it was, I went to HR and management, and I told them that my team doesn't need resources. I started with that premise, that my team doesn't need developers. I don't need developers. But there is a big caveat there. But if I do need a developer, that developer has to be somebody that we pick. So in exchange for, because one of the things that happens in organizations is that there's always never enough resources, there's always never enough hands working on projects. So other teams are busy, pushing HR, asking them for more and more, what do they call it, for more and more staff, while my own team, I don't ask for at all. But the only caveat is, when I do ask, it has to be someone that, so during the interviews, it's the team that interviews the new person. Okay, so it started with me. I was one who picked the first guy, right? I made sure that he was someone that aligned with my values and everything. And then when it was the turn of the second guy, the 2 of us now interviewed that guy and brought him in. So that's the flow, really. It's not, like I said, an A team will run laps around a B team, because there's something as negative work. That's one of the things I learned. Negative work is when you have someone who is working, but the person's net work is causing you to either redo his work, or is causing a lot of friction. So in order to avoid that, it's important that if you are picking a team, it's the team that gets to decide who joins them. Okay, they can't, it's not something that HR will just go and interview one person and say, oh, this guy has a very powerful resume. You have to take him. He's a first class in computer science. He has this, he has that. That doesn't fly with us, And when you come to us, the questions we'll ask you are questions that we feel are important. Like, do you do unit tests? What technologies do you use? What do you know by continuous delivery, continuous improvement, etc., etc. So there's that.
Good stuff. That's what's up. So
yeah.
I wish I could join your team.
That would be awesome. That would be a privilege.
So, like, I'm doing if it's okay with you, a change of topic.
No, it's okay.
I made my declaration to pick up Elm, the programming language, so I can enter the web development space. What are your thoughts on my decision, or on the actual technology?
Where do I start?
About to drop a bomb?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm about to make a lot of people unhappy. But well, I have to say it. Personally, I think a language standpoint, something like Elm, I can't even say it's good from a language standpoint. Okay, from a pure language standpoint, it's an awesome language, right? However, how it integrates with web technology is what I find concerning. Let me explain. Elm, from the little I know about Elm is a pure functional language, which means it doesn't like side effects. It believes in improvement, which is awesome. I'm all for that. I don't have any reservations there. The problem is, I think the problem has to do with abstraction. Okay, the concept of abstraction. When you abstract things, a good abstraction makes the underlying platform invisible. So, for example, the web is a good abstraction. HTTP is a good abstraction because it completely hides the TCP IP underneath, right? You could learn about HTTP. You could even become an expert in HTTP and never even know about TCP or UDP or any of those, right? So HTTP is a good abstraction in that sense, right? Because it means that you never have to drop to the low level. Okay, now bad abstractions will be something like link to SQL or entity framework. Those are bad abstractions, but they're necessary abstractions anyway. So it's not like bad abstractions here doesn't mean that they're not worthwhile or they're not good. It just means that when you are pushing an abstraction that's not complete, you should be very careful, because by the time you bump into the edge cases where that abstraction doesn't cover you, you need to be cognizant of the underlying layer. For example, if you are doing a link like iQueryable and all that, in fact, iQueryable in particular, it's not just link to objects. IEnumerable is fine, but iQueryable is where things can get really rough. So, for example, if you write a link query, right, on iQueryable and is using the link to SQL provider, there is a good chance that if you changed that provider, your app would break. Your app would break for reasons you would not even begin to imagine. For example, in SQL, when you do a sum, when you like write some link query and you say sum on a particular value, if nothing gets returned, SQL returns null or something like that. I think it returns null. So because it returns null and C# is expecting an integer, that causes a conflict, and that conflict only happens at runtime. So if you are someone who is learning link or iQueryable, you need to be aware that things like that can happen. So how do you fix it? Now the fix is different. If you're using link to SQL, you have to say, I think you'd have to handle the null somehow, maybe cast it as nullable int. If you're using entity framework, you have to say default if empty, 0 and all that. The reason I'm saying this is because Elm tries to abstract JavaScript as much as possible, which is good because JavaScript, you and I know, is very, very crazy. But if you don't fully understand what Elm is doing, by the time you get to those lower level where you are not brushing against the technology, it can be very, very frustrating. And sometimes there may not even be a solution. Okay, so that's my first, I think, problem I have with Elm. The second problem I have with Elm is this idea of web components, because it's not just Elm. So it's Vue.js, it's React, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in my mind, right, when we started the web, right, we started with the component model because, believe it or not, web forms, the whole web forms technology is actually just components. You have specific components like grid, like list view, like buttons, and so on and so forth. You would essentially drag the buttons to your page, which was like your view of some sort, and then you would have a no problem. You would have a method in your code behind, in quotes, that just handles like events that particular component was treating. And then you assembled your app by having components upon components and components that had components inside them and so on and so forth. And we all know how that ended up with web forms. Okay. What you want is to have perfect separation between your UI and your UI concerns from your what's the word? There's a name Uncle Bob calls it. You want to separate like your view models from your UI, such that your view models, your logic, has absolutely nothing to do with your UI. Okay, your logic just says these are the things that should be on the page, period. And then you have a view that does a binding and binds that logic to the entire view of the page, not to specific components. So for me, it's one of the reasons I just could not jump on the Angular 2 bandwagon. I'm a very big Angular fan. In fact, I've used Angular 1 for a very long time. From the moment Angular 1 came out, I used it almost exclusively. But the reason I'm shy on jumping on Angular 2 is especially because of that component model. Let me give you an example of one of the concerns you would have. Let's assume you have designed your app from end to end using Angular 2. It has so many nice components and everything, you've laid it out and it's perfect. And all of a sudden, your manager or the customer says, we want to refresh this UI. Okay, you guys' UI sucks and we need a designer to now do the new UI. And the designer obviously doesn't understand your React or your whatever, and he comes up with this marvelous, beautiful template. Okay, now converting your existing app that you've already built with specific components, you've already styled those specific components in specific ways, converting that to the new design would be a pain, as you can imagine, because it would mean going through each component, translating each component one by one, and redoing the whole thing. Whereas if all your business logic was doing was just giving you a view model, then all it would take is to just say, okay, scrap the old template, get the new template, put the placeholders for the new UI, and you're off to the races. So for me, that's the reason why this whole web component move hasn't convinced me yet, because that's where we started from. And after messing around with it, the new convention was no, separate your logic from your presentation, which is what gave birth to the rise of Angular and so on. But remember, jQuery was in a similar fashion. jQuery was the component model as well. So we now went to Angular and so on. And now moving back to that era, it's like, I don't really trust that judgment.
You're saying Elm has components?
Yeah, Elm is built based on components. Elm applications are built based on components, similar to React and and I think Vue.js. I think Vue.js is the most palatable of all of them. But yeah, Elm is basically it follows the same architecture with React.
Okay. I'm not familiar with any of the web frameworks. I'm not familiar with them. But okay, so what really is the definition of a component? I think you alluded to it earlier. From what I understand, you were saying a component is essentially some type of, I guess if we're talking about object orientation, a class that exposes some events potentially, and behavior.
Yeah. So
is that accurate or no?
No, okay, it's accurate. Just let me clear it up a bit. A component is a piece of three things put together. You have the markup, the design, the CSS, and you have the behavior all wrapped into one single piece. So rather than having your application, your web application as presentation separate, the UI, the design, the CSS, the look and feel separate, and the behavior as three separate entities. That's horizontally. It is split vertically now. Actually, it's split out vertically, split horizontally now. So your app would be a set of components that have other components inside of them, and each component would have those verticals. It would have behavior, it would have look and feel, it would have content. So
I'm still a student of Elm, but my current understanding is that Elm, one thing is Elm is purely functional, right?
Yes.
And so even if Elm is based on component architecture, which I'm not confident to say it is, because I'm still trying to learn it. It's not kind of like, statically in place. And for lack of a better expression, what I mean is that you can still swap out how the integration points of these components, meaning that you can swap out how what this component is going to respond to based on, in this case, when we're talking about Elm, messages, right? And so everything is still based on functions. And so I guess to make a long story short, the difference between maybe what you're expressing as components based on the way that software development is being done now versus Elm's attempt or implementation is that, with the exception of, I would say with the exception of XAML-based technologies such as WPF's Silverlight or Xamarin Forms, I think components have been kind of hard to test. The theory is that you should be able to test these units or components in complete isolation. And I think with XAML stuff, you can. Well, in this case, you don't really. I don't know. That's a long story. I guess what I would like to articulate is that within Elm, everything is still testable, and so I think that was the biggest hang up with this component architecture is, well, how do you test it? And you're automatically bringing in all these dependencies that you really don't want to bring in. You just want to test this, but you're bringing in the whole jungle that's attached to the banana. That's a popular illustration I keep hearing.
Yeah.
So
okay, so let me preface all the things I said, right? All the things I said are just my opinion. I could be wrong. I could change my mind. That is understandable. That is normal. But that's how I feel right now. And to answer your question, I think I would use Uncle Bob's answer. Uncle Bob said, what you want is to reduce your UI code to a point where you shouldn't even need to test it. Now that is controversial in its own right, but just hear out his logic. His logic was that your UI is not your app.
Right. I
okay. Your yeah, it's there to give interaction to your app. So if we take the XAML example, right, you don't want to test, or you shouldn't test that the XAML components are rendered based on what input was in your view model, because that's not your job. You're not writing a UI framework, right? Rather, what you should test is that your view model that came out of your application is exactly what you expect it to be, right? So one of the advantages of separating one of the advantages of separating the markup from your logic using something like a view model or whatever is that you can easily test that, because it will just be plain C# objects. Just check if this property is what I expect, check if that property is what I expect, and that's it, right? Not checking to see if the rendering was done correctly, or checking to see if, I don't know, the events were handled correctly on the UI, which if you go the component model, you might have to test. You understand? Or you might test it from the component perspective or something like that.
Okay. I think I understand. In this case, with Elm's architecture, my understanding is that based on your guidance, we're testing the update function of Elm. Elm is basically your model, which is the type, or that represents the state. Your update function and your view function. No, it can also, those are the three main components of the Elm architecture. And so it's the update function that I would like to say is kind of analogous to the view model, where you are basically throwing messages at this function called update, and you're getting a new state, or you're getting a new model, that's still completely separated from your view function. Your view function takes that model as input, right, as an argument, and then it goes ahead and it renders it. This is still a function, and so it's rendering it using lists. I don't have a diagram, but
no, I understand it.
Yeah,
I understand it. That's how React works too. In the case of React, you have a component. The component has a render function, and that render function is how it updates the screen. So every time you want something to change, you have to, I think I'm not mixing something up, but essentially what you said, Sha, it has to, that there is in the case of Elm it's called update, but in the case of React it's called render. So it calls the render function periodically, and because there's a virtual DOM, you can have as many rendering as possible, and every 60 frames it takes what is in the virtual DOM and now writes it out to the actual DOM.
The other part that is very attractive. So if we're on the same page, then I think both of us are saying that we still want to test the update function that's responsible for manipulating our model based on messages that have occurred. These messages can represent events, whatever you want to call it, but in Elm, they're called messages. Also commands too. Commands in Elm aren't, the iCommand interface with execute and can execute as the methods of the interface. A command within Elm is actually Elm's way of managing side effects based on a request that needs to be carried out. And so it has some special ceremony for still handling that in a purely functional way. At least that's my understanding of it. but it has some ceremony to it. So, but the thing that I'm attracted to is, now I'll say it again, is supposedly there's still no such thing as runtime exceptions when building a web application or running a web application based off of the Elm architecture. And the other part is I still get my favorite property-based testing, and so I have the ability to throw the entire kitchen sink at my update function that takes the model as an input, and I can that pretty much adds confidence that there's not going to be any edge cases that haven't been caught yet. Again, it's not going to throw any runtime exceptions, but also my expectations or my assumptions I get to test, and I get it out the box because it's still functional. So those are things that really turn me on / arouse me about the architecture.
Okay, so my thoughts on that is for me, I think what I don't like about Elm is the fact that the interrupt story, remember what I said about abstraction. So the interrupt story with regular JavaScript is where there is, of course, Elm is pure and the rest of JavaScript is impure. You have no pointers, you have runtime exceptions and all that. So I have not looked into Elm, so let me preface all of this and say that I have not looked into Elm. My opinion on it might change, but you know, from what I can imagine is you'd have to jump through hoops in order to interoperate with like regular JavaScript, because from the way it was explained to me, right, Elm lives in his own sandbox, and in order to communicate with the rest of the JavaScript world, it has to do this
port,
like it has to like open a port, exactly, and you know, push side effects out and you know, get side effects in and manage that essentially. If you're building your entire app in Elm, I can imagine that would be awesome. But if you're not, or if you have to leverage some kind of JavaScript library that has not been, you know, converted to Elm, I can see that being a source of pain. I don't know if you've tried Fable before.
Tried the what?
Fable.io.
Fable, no, I haven't.
Okay, so Fable is essentially a competitor with Elm, but rather than, you know, coming from it from the purist perspective, it actually comes from it from the, you know, TypeScript perspective. So it's like I really love Fable, but it's not, from what I've seen, it's not exactly okay. It's good. So this is what Fable does. Fable allows you compile your F# directly to JavaScript, and they re-implemented, because you know F# is more than just the language itself. It comes with, there are so many functions like the sequence module, there are so many modules and all that. So they re-implemented all those modules in JavaScript, so that what it allows you to do is you can write your normal F# with property-based tests, with, you know, printf and so on and so forth, and it will compile it to JavaScript. Okay, now because F# has the ability to deal with impurity, F# has the ability to have a tie classes and objects and mutable state and all those kind of things, it's possible to have very good interrupt between Fable and your regular JavaScript. So in Fable, you can just write a class and compile it, and it becomes a JavaScript class. And you know, it doesn't try to, I think it does try to still abstract JavaScript from you, but if you want to drop down to the low level and emit the JavaScript by hand, you're free to do that, which is for me what is even more compelling, because it means that if I hit any of the edge cases, I have an escape route that wouldn't cause, you know, so much headache. But for both Fable and Elm, I think there is still need, because they are not pure abstractions. There is still need to, you know, like understand how JavaScript works behind the scenes, so that you don't get beaten. Okay. TypeScript, on the other hand, is it's the last one, which is at the extreme. TypeScript is essentially okay. So to put it into perspective, if C# and F# are 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock respectively, TypeScript would be 3 o'clock. So TypeScript is not all the way to F# and is not all the way backwards to C#. It does have functions. It has it has very cool generics. It has type inference like F#. It has a lot of cool things, but it borrows from JavaScript syntax. So its syntax is, you know, pure JavaScript. And in fact, if you have a raw JavaScript file, you can just put it in TypeScript and you're off to the races. So in terms of interrupt story, I think TypeScript is the least is the path of least resistance. But then again, the TypeScript syntax is still JavaScript-ish and, you know, C#-ish. So it's not something. It's something that if you're someone who does JavaScript on a daily basis, yes, you would actually enjoy TypeScript a lot. And the last part is that, you know, for Fable to be compiled, you know, for F# to be able to compile to JavaScript, right? I told you they had to re-implement most of the .NET framework functions, which means that when you write an app in Fable, it has to reference those, you know, JavaScript files, those JavaScript functions and all. And for a web app, that may be too much, right? In other words, there is a runtime baggage that comes with compiling to JavaScript. And I'm sure, I don't know, but I think that's the same case with Elm as well. TypeScript, on the other hand, doesn't have any of those problems because TypeScript just interoperates with JavaScript out of the box. So if you're building a very small app and you just want little, you don't want to just have some, you know, minimal JavaScript here and there, then, you know, TypeScript is a better fit because it doesn't involve downloading an entire runtime just to make it interoperate with JavaScript. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm still trying to learn Elm, but I mean, I didn't think Elm was pulling in anything external, or is it? Does Elm has its own runtime? I thought it was just, you know, still compiling down. I mean, there's no like, you know, Java Virtual Machine or the CLR from .NET. I thought that Elm was just a programming language that distills down into JavaScript.
Okay, I think runtime is the wrong word to use, right? It's more like a BCL of sorts. So, like I said, right, there are certain things the browser doesn't give you out of the box. So the browser doesn't give, obviously, the browser doesn't give you, what do they call it? It doesn't give you sequence module, filter, select many, link, and all this kind of stuff, right? So that's for Fable now. So in order for F# to compile to JavaScript, you know, like regular F# with printf and all those kind of things, they have to re-implement all those in JavaScript. They have to re-implement the main core functions in JavaScript so that if you have a F# code that calls into it, say, for example, sequence.collect, right? There is an implementation that exists. So, but I was even impressed to see that Fable, they even implemented a good number of, you know, the core things that F# uses, even down to agents. So they re-implemented agents in JavaScript. I'm sure they implemented it in F#, then compiled it to JavaScript and put it as part of the Fable library of sorts. Okay, so if your app is running and your app now needs to use that agent, that code has to be pulled down with your app, with your web app, right? So that's the point I'm saying. I'm not so sure. Right now, I won't jump into it just yet until I can see that the browsers now support module loading natively. When all the browsers support module loading natively and it's, you know, available across the board, then I'll consider doing it. Other than that, there's this thing called Webpack that statically goes through your app and, you know, pulls in all the dependencies and puts it into a single file, which is all well and good, but to be honest, it's a lot to ask of, you know, because that would mean that you now need. I feel like I'm contradicting myself.
Well, I thought you use Webpack when you want to do interop with JavaScript libraries.
Oh no. Webpack. The job of Webpack is
or
to,
CSS or anything else that's outside of Elm. If you're doing everything within Elm, it was my current understanding that you don't need Webpack, but if you want to assemble other packages that are outside of Elm, hence the various tools such as CSS or HTML or JavaScript libraries, that Webpack, you bring Webpack in and it supposedly bundles and packages everything. That was my understanding,
okay.
but I never used it, so.
I can't speak to whether or not you would need Webpack if you're doing Elm, because I don't know. But I do know for a fact that if you're doing Fable, Webpack is compulsory because of what I said about it having other runtime dependencies that are not necessarily part of your app. It has its own version of the standard library. You know, imagine you have the runtime, right? You have the .NET, the CLR runtime, and you also have the BCL, the base class library. So when your app is running, your app definitely uses things from the base class library. Okay, so somewhere on your machine there has to be .dll, there has to be systems or collections or DLL, there has to be, you know, where string lives, where, you know, all those things live. It has to be loaded into the runtime as well. So with Fable is the same thing, because by default F# uses a lot of those you know, libraries and components. It references them using the new ES6 format. But the wahala with ES6 is that ES6 is not supported yet by all the browsers. So if you just deployed your app like that, right, it would the browser would not be able to resolve import statements. So it would have something like import system.string or whatever. It wouldn't be able to do that. So where comes in, Webpack analyzes all those files statically, and then now statically links all the files. So if it sees that there's an import statement to, you know, my web.js, it would, you know, bundle that my web.js and ultimately just spit out one file. That's my understanding of Webpack anyway.
Odie, what do you do for fun?
Well,
because you're like severely technical. Like, I just had to stop everything and figure out, like, what do you do outside of building software?
I play a lot of video games, even though it's stereotypical. But yeah, I have a PS4 here. So
Yeah.
when my brain is clogged, I just whip it out and just play a few games and all that.
Call of Duty.
Nah, I'm more of an adventure guy. I like storytelling and, you know, adventure games like that. And again, the reason I don't play FPS is because it makes me nauseous. The last FPS I played was a BioShock Infinite, and that was because the story was so compelling that I would play it for half an hour and go and throw up and come back and keep playing. Yeah.
So that's how you unload. You jump on the sticks. In the States, we call it the sticks, or maybe in the 90s, we call it the sticks when you start playing video games. I might be out of touch now. I don't know what this generation calls it. But
yeah, still the same thing.
It's yeah, so like, I mean, you're like Wikipedia when it comes to like talking about software, and I was like, okay. I was trying to keep up, and I started tapping out. I'm like, so I don't have your endorsement to pick up Elm.
Okay. It's difficult to say because I personally have not. If I've used the technology, like really used the technology, I will tell you a definitive answer. But right now, it's in the realm of it depends. So I think it's a good language to learn, but as an abstraction, I'm sure it's not a problem. I'm pretty sure it's not a complete abstraction. So you still need to understand like JavaScript, okay? Then if after learning and understanding the nitty-gritties of JavaScript, then you can now pick up Elm. That way, when you run into a situation that you just don't understand, it will be possible for you to look at the JavaScript that got generated and be able to debug it from there. So, yeah, I
So
think.
how do you think that was handled in the past? So once upon a time, there were programmers that wrote assembly code. You know, I don't know if that was in like the 60s and 70s, but like, you know, they were keeping track of their whopping 16 registers, and
Yep.
they were popping and pushing values, you know, onto these various registers. And and then came along maybe C, the programming
Exactly.
language, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, you think people raise the same concern that you're raising?
Yes, they did. They did. And in fact, okay, so believe it or not, even today, some people still do assembly, right? So that means that all our programming languages are not like perfect abstractions, because, sorry, because there are certain capabilities that were lost when moving from assembly to C. Because, for example, in assembly, if somebody read a stream of bytes, the person could choose whether to interpret that stream of bytes as an instruction or interpret it as data. So what that meant was it made it easy to do. I want to cut down on the technical jargon, but it made it easy to like transfer code and execute it. So it was possible for someone to read code from the disk or from a floppy disk or from wherever, just read it and they just execute the code immediately. C lost a bit of that. So C being strongly typed and all, a lot of that was lost. Yes, there were ways of doing it with pointers and all, but it wasn't still perfect. However, C was a good enough abstraction for the 99% case that you almost never need to write raw assembly ever. So that, it's not a perfect abstraction like HTTP, but it's a good enough abstraction that, yeah, go ahead.
This is a question. So there weren't libraries that were written in assembly
No, they were.
that C programmers wanted to pull in and as they're building their solution? Because that's what we're talking about right now between Elm and JavaScript. Is you're saying you still need to have JavaScript fundamentals when more than likely when building an Elm solution, and so that's why you're kind of on the bench about if it provides a good enough abstraction. And I'm like, well, let's visit history and how did people solve those problems 30 years ago, 40 years ago?
Okay, to put it into perspective, Elm would not be like C. It's TypeScript, and TypeScript will be like C++ rather. It's TypeScript that will be more like C. Elm is more like C#, okay, where you have this enclosed barrier in which a lot of things are done for you. So anytime you need to talk to the underlying hardware, it is really painful in C#. You have to use com interrupt and all those craziness, whereas in C++ and C, calling into the lower layers like assembly, loading assembly in, it's not as seamless as I'm making it sound, but it is far much easier than doing it from C#.
And what was the cost of that? There was a trade-off or a compromise, right?
Exactly.
Is you shoot yourself in the foot if you didn't do something right, and
Exactly.
that would result in the chain reaction of cascading effects. So yeah, okay.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the best way to put it. In fact, Linus Torvalds, the guy who created Linux, they asked him, "What's your favorite language?" And he said C. And they asked him why. He said, "Well, when I'm writing C, I can imagine what the assembly looks like." Okay, so that guy is crazy. So,
He's one
but
of a kind.
yeah, he is. Imagine he invented Linux and Git in one fell swoop, and both of which have just set the world aflame. But that's how TypeScript is. When you're writing TypeScript, you can see what the JavaScript would look like. To a lesser extent, when you're writing Fable, you can imagine what the JavaScript would look like. But with Elm, I'm thinking that Elm is even further down the line of you might have absolutely no idea what the JavaScript looks like if you write an app in Elm.
And I don't want to know what JavaScript looks like. For me, as someone that's entering the web development space, I don't want to be at that level. Now I think I haven't really used TypeScript, right, at all. But does TypeScript really constrain you, or is it pretty much doing the same thing that C# does, where it just has, you know, static typing, or you're using the type system so that you could catch more bugs before you actually like launch the actual program? So meaning, my question is, does TypeScript, how focused is TypeScript on correctness? Can you still write untestable TypeScript code?
The truth is, you can write untestable code in virtually any language. Any language can be abused.
Well,
however,
a function is a function is a function. No?
Okay. Yeah.
My point being that if it's already inherently testable and there's no side effects, then it's testable. But you're constrained to. Now, you could choose not to write a test, but you can't use the excuse of all these dependencies and it's too convoluted and I'm introducing the whole jungle just to test this one piece. You know, that I don't. Again, I'm not as experienced as. Man, when I have conversations with you, I may not be even as experienced as you, but I think that's the difference between functional programming or purely functional programming language versus object-oriented, is that at least you're constrained to have a code base that is testable regardless of if you choose to write tests or not.
So to answer your question, when you think of untestable code, what does it remind you of? You know, like when you look at untestable C#, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Who wrote this?
No.
There's a couple things that come to my mind. The first part is, why did I inherit this? The second part is, what constraints did they have on them such that they wrote it this way? And that's something that's important that I have to ask, is what constraints did that person have for them to write it this way? That person could be fresh out of college and learning on the job, which is understandable. That person can be quote unquote senior, right? You notice I said quote unquote senior.
Yeah.
And maybe he or she was feeling the pressure. And so they did whatever they had to do based on the conditions at that time. I think about that. And then my last question is, why me? Why do I have the responsibility to repair this or get something to work? And I'm looking at this right here. I mean, everybody knows I'm not a fan of manually testing an application. I understand exploratory testing, but I think that's completely different from testing to see if your code works. Exploratory testing is, let me see if this software still holds up when I do things that may not fit into the traditional workflow.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Very, very rarely do I think about goddamn C# or Java. No, it's more of, I put the blame on that person. And the other part is like, well, now it's holding me hostage. Now I am maintaining this code, and now I cannot exercise diligence to do the professional thing of programmatically adding yet another check and balance so that this code is thoroughly checked regardless of any additional updates or additions of features, right? I guess that's the same thing as update. And so I get frustrated because now I am forced to, whenever I modify this library, you know, for whatever reason, a bug fix or an enhancement, I have to take my incredible skill and put it on the shelf and manually test when I'm so used to, like you say, automate everything, you know, in the beginning of our conversation. And I feel like I'm being held hostage because I'm being constrained to be primitive, you know, and I don't like it.
Yeah, that's very true. In fact, one of the things to me about untestable code is that untestable code is code that does too much. So yes, a function is a function is a function, but if you have the God function that does everything, okay, it's not as if it's impossible to test. It's just that it is so difficult to test that people wouldn't even write tests for it.
Well, so, okay. So pardon me as I interrupt respectfully.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
But that's something that I'm willing to debate you on. Okay.
Okay.
Because when you think about the definition of a function, it has one or more inputs and it has one output. Honestly, purists would argue that a function has one input and one output. And you probably know what I'm referring to in regards to like currying, right? And so, yeah, what if a function does a whole bunch of things, right? And maybe when you say, well, that will still be somewhat impossible because what you're referring to, I think, when you say a whole bunch of quote unquote things, would be a function that basically results in various side effects. But in a pure function, those side effects don't occur. And so, again, you're only testing for one output. You put whatever inputs that you want, you know, but you're only testing for one output. You're not testing for other. This isn't a class. You're not executing a method and then asserting that various properties of this instance has mutated to some expectation. You're not doing that at all. And so hence my argument of yes, someone can butcher a function, but at the end of the day, it's still going to return that one result. And it's going to always be repeatable, regardless of all the bloat that they have inside of it. So that's all.
So, okay, let's do a thought experiment. By that logic, right, a web server is a function.
Okay.
Okay, it takes a HTTP request and it returns a HTTP response. Now, what happens in between could be so massive that there are so many variations on the results that comes out that it makes it difficult to test the correct behavior. Does that make sense?
All right, so we have to dig into this. You said a web server. All right.
A web server.
So, yeah, but there's HTTP, right? But then there's a browser too, right? Like,
yes.
The web server is going to either, I'm not a web developer, right? But it's either going to return back some HTML, I thought, or it's going to return back, I mean, ultimately it has status codes, but somewhere there's HTML that gets pulled out from it. I'm not sure if that you could really call that HTTP, but and then also, you know, some status code. And also a payload that's attached to the status code. I mean, that's at a high level. Again, I'm not really comfortable in pure web. But if it's a pure function, then my logic still persists. Now, if you're talking about TCP, UDP, and all that stuff that's being handled under the scenes, Well, if it's really abstracted away, then I don't know.
Okay, so let me explain. This is
Okay.
what I'm trying to say. In a functional architecture, this is how you develop web applications. You have tiny functions that do specific things. Okay, you aggregate them to form services that do, still specific things, but they are an aggregate of all the tiny things that need to be done. Then you aggregate services to form a use case. A use case could be place order, or do whatever, maybe place order, deduct cards, whatever the case may be. It forms a use case. Now what happens is your web server, your web application, is a function that takes a HTTP request and now picks what use case to execute, which is a function inside of itself. Now imagine if someone collapses all those layers into one God function that is so large and so massive that it would have to take every single dependency that it ever needs, and it has to now return one output. Now, it's not as if it's impossible to test. It is possible to test it, but testing it will be so painful, because essentially you would have to supply every variable, every dependency, and you would have to check that against the output. So the number of permutations of the possible things that can happen starts to explode.
Well, that's where you use property-based testing.
I get that, but
okay.
The point is, yeah, I get that. The point I'm trying to make is that it is still possible for someone to write code in a purely functional language that is so painful to test that you may not even test it at all. Any language can be abused. That's my point.
Yeah. I think, I guess I haven't come across. I've worked within a functional code base before that's like an actual like enterprise, not just GitHub. I'm talking about like, an actual corporation, and they were using F#. And so I understand that, even functional code can have technical debt. It can be broken down to be more understandable. I get that part.
Yeah.
I would be curious. I guess I have to plead ignorance for right now, because part of me is curious that, are you still likely to have a lot of code bloat within a function, as you would within a method? Within a method, people do whatever they want. They handle a whole bunch of different responsibilities all within that method, and that method can basically return a void. And so you can do whatever you want in the method. All the side effects you want, you can print, you can generate random numbers, you can do whatever you want. Within a function, I guess you can still do the same thing as long as you return a result back, even if that result is a unit. So to your point, I get what you're saying. Do I see people adding 10 parameters to a function? No. But then again, to your point, I've had maybe 14 years looking at object-oriented code from C++ to, from BB to C++ to C#, but I've probably only had like maybe less than a year looking at professional functional code. So I guess it's not fair for me to.
So here's the thing, right? This is the reason I'm in love with functional language. The problem is not whether it can be abused. The problem is, when it is abused, what tools do you have to disabuse yourself? Okay, and functional code tends not to get tangled like that, because it's easier to pick it apart. So if you have a function that is that large and does so many things, it's easy to just, especially if you are in a pure functional language, it's easy because of referential transparency. It's easy for you to just pick out sections and refactor them out into their own smaller functions and break those functions into smaller functions and so on and so forth. So it's not that it can't get abused, it's that when it does get abused, it's easy to fix. Whereas in object-oriented code, when it does get abused, you're stuck because right now you don't know whether if you refactor out a method, somebody might have called into.
It touches too many things potentially.
Yeah. How many times have you seen a method and you are free to delete it because you don't know who has called that method behind the scenes or what the method is supposed to do? Or like there was one that really grinded my gears recently. Let me just give you a gist. I was so pissed. I was reading some enterprise, enterprise code. That's what we do. So I got someone's code, and the name of the method was get user by ID query. Okay. Now you would assume that get user by ID query, it takes an ID and returns the user, right?
Yeah. So one would think.
Yeah. That's what you think, right? It turns out that what he was doing was, yes, he does return the user if the user exists. If the user does not exist, he creates the user, sends it to the database, calls save changes on it, makes modifications to the profile table and all this kind of stuff. And I looked at this function and I was so pissed because this is something that is so misleading, because if someone was looking at the call site where the method was called, you would not imagine that method was doing all the nasty things it was doing. And when you step over it, you'll be like, but this value should be, what I expect it to be. And the fact that it wasn't there made me so pissed. Like, in fact, I nearly lost my shit that day.
Was that person still there?
Of course he was now. I, took my frustration out of him, but yeah, that's, something for another day, which is part of the reason why.
Well, what I meant to say was, when you did whatever you needed to do to make an update that you needed to make, was there time allocated to help that person understand how much time can be misdirected, towards writing code that way? And here's an alternative approach that will result in less time troubleshooting.
You see, the thing is, the person is not in my team, okay. So it's not like I could sit him down, because if you're a member of my team that did it, yes, that would be what we would do during our code review. I would explain all the possible things that could go wrong. For example, what if I called that method in a loop, and all of a sudden you have 1,000 queries to your database, 1,000 save files or whatever? What if, so many things could go wrong, like thread safe? Is it thread safe? What if multiple threads were accessing that thing? Anyway, that's beside the point. The point is, if he was a member of my team, that would have been much easier for me to sit down with us. But this wasn't a member of my team. It was code I inherited as part of this new platform. And that so annoyed me. It so annoyed me.
So do you use CodeMap?
Not much.
Well,
not
that
much.
probably could have helped you out, unless everything was still inside the same method. CodeMap generates the UML of the actual code base. And so you will see the dependencies visually, and you will see what, at a high level, what namespaces talk to other namespaces, what classes talk to other classes, what methods invoke other methods. And so you see that visually. And so that's a tool that I use, especially when I'm building or writing C# code, because I usually share that information with the quote unquote architect. I hate architects. And also I'll run code analysis and get the maintainability index on all the different libraries, and I feed that to QA so that they can do some better, so that they can enhance their testing based on libraries that could be related to specific features that they could just hammer away on. So
that's cool.
C# got some tools.
Yeah, that's something that I'm trying to see if I can help out with in the F sharp side. In fact, most of the properties we built, my team built, we actually built it in C sharp because the F we wanted to .NET Core was really important for us, and unfortunately we use Visual Studio most of the time, and the .NET Core tooling on Visual Studio isn't up to par. In fact, it's non-existent in Visual Studio. Yes,
Something happened on Twitter yesterday. A lot of people got upset.
Now what?
I don't know. Something happened on Twitter where like desktop applications were no longer compatible with some I don't know if it was .NET Standard or .NET Core. Honestly, I don't know too much about that stuff. No matter how many times people tell me about it, I'm still like, I don't think it affects me yet. So, but something happened yesterday and it upset a lot of people.
Well, if you have a link, you send it to me. I'd like to see it.
Okay.
But .NET Core is really good. I really like the technology. It's fast, it's performant. It has a lot of the newer things out of the box. So it has Identity Server 4 core, and it has all the improvements over Identity Server 3. Identity Server is for doing like single sign-on. So if you want to have single sign-on between multiple applications and APIs, you use the Identity Server for that. And the .NET Core version is quite good. It's easily customizable and all. Even things like authentication, authorization, regular stuff you do in your .NET applications, they are much easier in .NET Core. So, and the fact that you can build, you can run it without needing Visual Studio, for me, it's a very compelling package. The only problem is right now, F Sharp is not there yet in terms of the Visual Studio tooling. For me, I could easily use VS Code, but the rest of my team, they are not VS Code people.
I'm freaking just now learning it. I mean, I'm thankful that it's free, but there's some things that I'm still scratching my head on. So, yeah, I like using the Shift Alt arrow keys so that I can modify multiple lines at once, and I don't see that there.
What they have is I think Shift F2 or so. Yeah, Shift F2 allows you. They select all the lines, so you can select all the occurrences of a particular variable and just rename it. And they don't have a full refactor yet, if I remember. But yeah. I think shout out to what's his name? Is it Christoph or something? There's the guy who's working on Ionide. He really did a great job in F Sharp support for Visual Studio Code. But the rest of my team are pure Visual Studio people. So, there is absolutely no story for .NET Core in F Sharp, which is just sad. And as much as I'm an expert, I'm very far from where the experts are. In fact, if the experts are over there, I'm way in another state. In terms of, because what I want to do is to be good enough to be able to contribute to the Visual F Sharp tools for Visual Studio. If I could do that, wow, that would be awesome. The thing is, the F Sharp compiler is not, in my mind, that's a work of art, to say the least. The F Sharp compiler is not it's not trivial to understand. Let's put it that way. And there is no like guidance that says, or no video tutorials, or there is no tutorials that says, okay, this is a breakdown of the F Sharp compiler. This is what this one does. This is what this does. You really need to be a compiler construction geek to be able to contribute to the Visual F Sharp compiler. But yeah, I hope to get there someday.
I just realized that Dallas Luther had asked a question while we were talking. I assume a while ago. I don't know. We're no longer talking about it, but he said, good point on referential transparency, but what about indirection? And then he says, fun function has a good video on this. Straight line code over functions. Indirection. I have to re-look up indirection because I'm kind of. What do you think he means by indirection?
Indirection, I think that's okay. So when you pass a function as a parameter, that's a form of indirection, because um, when you call that function, you don't know what is going to, you don't know what you are invoking. So that's, it's a little bit of indirection. So in C sharp, that would be the equivalent of calling a method on an interface. Okay, so it goes through the, you are calling this method, Abby. Is that not? Maybe I'm missing the point, but let me see. Hold on, let me quickly Google that. Let me be sure that I know what I'm saying. Let me not say the wrong thing. Indirection, the software. I think that's it. I think it's reference something in the name instead of the value itself. Yes, yes, that's correct. So indirection is where, like, you reference a function, but you don't know what function it's going to be. The classic example is in OOP land, you want to encrypt a string. Okay, so you would have something called a I encryption service, or whatever the case may be, that has a method that says encrypt, that takes a string and returns a string in a so what you now do is you inject that I encryption service in your controller or whatever, and then you would get a reference to that thing you injected and just call encrypt. Now you don't know whether you are calling MD5 encryption or SHA-512 encryption or whatever the encryption is happening behind the scenes, but you just have a reference to that thing. So higher order functions play the same role. So when you take a function as a parameter that is maybe takes a string and returns a string, like the encrypt, you invoke that function, you don't know whether it's even going to encrypt the string or do whatever to the string. All you care about is, I'm giving you a string, I expect another string back. Right now, what happens in between, you don't, that's the indirection there. So you are indirectly, calling functionality through some kind of lens or view or interface or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that was Luther was saying layers of indirection. So I guess he was being more specific.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Like, I don't really, as you could probably tell, I'm fighting off a sickness that's coming soon. Like I've been feeling it for like the last 2 days, so I've been trying to rest up. I stopped lifting weights. I stopped running, and it's like you see a storm coming, and you're just waiting for it to hurry up and come. And that's the way I feel right now.
Yeah, that's also where I am too, because yeah, something happened. I think we started having some serious rain here, so that just messed the weather up for me, and I had to even leave work early. I had to leave work around 12 and just come home, take Actifed and rest, because it's been a tough 1 month for me. Shipping 3 products in the space of 1 month is not, it's not an easy task. So,
well, do you think it's possible?
I did it. It's not it's possible.
Feasible.
No, it's
sustainable. How about that?
Okay, so for me, I see it as a sacrifice. The apps that those links I sent to you, they're not perfect though, don't get me wrong. You will see a lot of craziness in them. Obviously, we had to crash the time and all, but what we are planning to do is to go on that continuous improvement track. So what happens is we take the feedback from production and build it into our software from scratch. So if we get like application insight metrics that tells us that, okay, users are hitting this particular page or users are viewing this particular thing, we go back and add more focus or priority to those things. And just like with Azure, we have a 2-week, I think Azure is 4 weeks, but we have a 2-week sprint, cadence sprint. So whether or not a particular feature is complete, right? Whatever features are ready are what we ship after every 2 weeks. So that's of course, they have to go through QA and all of that. But our goal is to make sure that every 2 weeks we are improving the platform, even if it's inches at a time. I've seen that happen a lot in Azure. Azure did not become this massive global thing. Did you use Azure in the early days, in the very, very early days, before
Nope.
Scott Gu and Co?
Nope.
They had a Silverlight. It was a Silverlight portal. Yeah, so you can imagine how old and rusty it was. In fact, I don't know how true it is, but I was told that what Scott Gu did when he took over the Azure group was he brought all the top guys in Microsoft, Azure team, and told them to create an app in a day. To create an app within 24 hours. It was like a hackathon. So and they struggled to do it. The ones who actually succeeded in deploying the app, it was so painful to them. And he was now telling them that, imagine you who's invested in Microsoft, you have a vested interest in Microsoft, it is still difficult and painful for you to deploy your app. How much more someone who is on the outside? So, he was the one who started this whole revolution of, okay, let's make sure that it's open technologies, and every 2 weeks, whatever features are available that are ready, that are actually done, get shipped. So if you want your feature to follow a release, you better finish it within that 2-week sprint. Otherwise, it is not going to follow that release. So, having that cadence now meant that over time, this is over 5, 6, 7 years now, they have a lot of stuff. Azure in itself, it's massive. It's massive.
I would love to like just, oh my God. All right. So when you were like a student or when earlier in your career or even now, did you ever take a tour of like a auto plant or assembly plant or a factory floor?
No, not really. No, I didn't.
I have. And
Okay.
I even like watch Discovery Channel, and like there's programs on like how something is made, and they talk about all the automation that's involved in order to produce whatever widgets. I would love just to see what Amazon and or AWS and Azure, what they do, all the processes, practices, and just their philosophy on ensuring quality. Both for code that's already in existence and also new features. I would love to like just see that in action and see what processes they have and like what rituals they perform. Like, yeah. So you said something that made me think about it. Oh yeah, when you're talking about like just how much quote unquote stuff that is out there already with Azure, and I'm like, if it has been 7 years, I know they pump out features like on a regular, and like,
yeah, every 2 weeks, every two,
and
3 weeks
I'm
or so.
sure every once in a while there may be a mishap with something unexpected, but I don't really hear about it. And so like, why are they so unique, and why is it? This is another conversation, but like, why can't we all like adopt the practices of these top performing organizations? Like, we see how productive they are. Microsoft stock is going up because they're making hella money with Azure services. And that stuff is very critical. It has to be controlled, and it seems like they're doing a good job with quality. I'm pretty sure they automate everything. I'm pretty confident they do. Why is it so hard for the rest of the industry to like do something that just feels right? I know the answer to that is called skill set of individual developers. But
yeah, I think the answer to that question is multiple layers, but let's look at it from a business perspective, because ultimately the people we are talking about are businesses. Okay, from a business perspective, it has to do with vision and leadership. Hear what I'm saying? It has little to do with the technology, it has little to do with the personnel, it has little to do with the staff. It has everything to do with the vision and the leadership. How did Amazon start? Jeff Bezos woke up one morning and said, these are monoliths, they have to end. Each team has to have its own service, and the way you talk to another team is through using REST or whatever case may be. But the idea of having a single application as a monolith, that's Amazon.com, that has to die. and he drove that vision. He drove it hard. So he made sure that teams are properly isolated, made sure that they built in the necessary constraints and all, and once they got over that hurdle, they now figured that, wait, we can actually give this, guidance, this set of tools and this our infrastructure to other people. And that's how AWS started. The same thing with Azure, right? It took Scott Goo and co to wake up one morning and say, you know what, we are in this for the long haul. We're not rushing to just deploy Azure and for the next build and everybody claps and we all walk away, right? So we need to do whatever it takes to make sure that we have the groundwork. I remember there was a particular build that I watched where Scott Goo was explaining all the things that goes into Azure, and it is incredible. For every data center they probably have 3 backups of that data center. That is why you will never hear of failures. Microsoft just failed. And every time it has happened before, it has happened on some occasions. And anytime it happens, they do a thorough investigation and they make sure they put the necessary things in place in their pipeline to make sure that that occurrence never happens. If you do that, if you are in that mindset of continuously improving your automated process, what happens is your process becomes more stable over time, and your defects now drops inversely. So the chances of you having, some kind of flaw in your process will be asymptotically tending to 0. So I think that is what the rest of the industry needs to do, and it's the management and the leadership that needs to push it. Here's why I say it. I say it because in my company, they don't believe in that bullshit. They don't believe in that crap. However, I was able to, lobby, in quotes, and get like management buy-in for the 3 platforms I just mentioned, the NaijaWella, the Softwella, the LaughWella. So much so that I was able to get enough influence to carve out my own, bubble, if you will, for myself and my team, such that they know that, look, we're in this for the long haul. It's not something we're doing. It's not something we just want to do and just ship and just move on. Quality is important, and we have to build this into the product. We have to focus on automation so that by the time, so by the time the platform grows, the platform can grow and scale. So by the time the platform is so large, the same team can still be managing it. So having all those in place now meant that, yes, I now had I was now empowered to do the right thing. I was now empowered to get the right people. I was now empowered to get the right process. I was now empowered to, push everything to the cloud. I was now empowered to, work on instrumenting, automating, and all of that. So if you don't have the leadership and the vision, there is no technical solution to that problem. You need to have the leadership and the vision. The leadership and the vision is what is going to make the environment such that if you're a developer who doesn't like to test your code, you don't believe in quality, that the environment will just read you out naturally without even without necessarily having to look out for it. You know what I mean? So that's what I think, really.
I know what you mean, and I had this discussion with who did I talk to? I talked to Michael Feathers about this. I talked to somebody. Oh shit, Mike, is it? Okay, I talked to Michael Feathers, or I talked to somebody like a week ago, and there's a book I think called Developer Hegemony or something like that, and he raised a really good point. I didn't read the book. I was watching the Simple Programmer interview with him. He's also on .NET Rocks too, in which he was like, are law firms run by lawyers? I think they are.
Yeah, almost exclusively.
Are software shops run by developers? No.
You and I know the answer to that question.
They're run by my experience here in the States. They're run by people in finance.
Yeah, that is true. That is very true.
Not sure why non-technical people run technical shops, but it's considered normal here. And and hence maybe the what's the word I'm looking for? The lower value on quality and automating everything is because I don't think they wear that type of hat. They're all about budget, and I feel like I'm curious what your thoughts are, but I feel like a lot of developers, man, I could have sworn software developers used to be like a white collar job, and I feel like it's more blue collar now. Like they just hire people and throw them at a problem, get rid of them. Like I don't think they're valued as much anymore.
Do you remember the tweet I sent about the perception of developers is that we're supposed to be grunt workers, and it doesn't make sense in a knowledge economy. It was I can't remember who said that. It was on .NET Rocks. He said it, and ultimately what he was saying was that it doesn't make sense because, like you just said, you have what do they call it? You have law firms that are being run by lawyers. You have engineering firms being run by engineers. So to a large extent, they understand what's truly important. Yes, money is important, but there are other things that are also important as well. Otherwise, you shouldn't be doing software business. My thought is that is going to change. In fact, it's already changing. If you look at the top IT companies in the world, okay, they are basically run by technical people, by software developers, by and so on and so forth. Take a look at Microsoft, for example, right? It was run by Bill Gates, and Bill Gates had the vision. Bill Gates had the vision and the business acumen to be able to see that, oh, the internet is going to be a thing, right? And that Windows, as powerful as Windows is, that is a new platform he needed to jump on. So it got to a point he was like, whatever it takes, right, to make sure that they play a space in the web. And that led to antitrust and all that. But the point is, as a developer, he could understand that this is really important. Now, contrast that with Steve Ballmer, who was literally shown the iPhone and he made fun of it. You understand? Because he couldn't see what Steve Jobs was saying as to, this is not a mobile operating system. This is a full-blown operating system that happened to be in a mobile form factor. And Steve Ballmer could not see the difference. Yes, he was able to, he was a business guy. He understood business and all that. But, what happens is, such companies, they peak at a particular point and they start to decline. And the management will start to scramble because now they have no idea why their sales are declining, things are declining, and so on and so forth. That is somewhat happening in my own company. I don't know. I hope I don't get fired.
Well, this is live. I'm sorry.
Anyway, whatever.
Anyway,
there's an adage in my place that says that the bird perching on the branch, his fate is not in the branch. His fate is in his wings, in his ability to fly. So that if the branch breaks, he can just fly to another branch. So him perching on the branch, he's not afraid that the branch might break because he has his faith is in his wings to fly. So for me, it's the same thing. I'm not my faith is not I hope the company doesn't go down, because if the company shuts down tomorrow morning, I will get a job tomorrow morning. So I don't have a problem with that. But essentially, that's what's happening at my company, where we've peaked at a point, made billions of naira, right? Which is maybe hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe tens of millions of dollars. But we peaked at a point, and then we're starting to decline. And all of a sudden, the management, who are not technical people, are now pressing all the buttons to figure out what will work. Okay, so but that's not really help.
It's natural.
Yeah. So that's not really what's helping them. But what now happened was, the smart thing they did was to come to us, the technical people, and say, what do we do? You guys are the smart ones. You guys know what to do. What solutions should we build? How should we focus our energy? And now we giving them that input is now making the lives of both parties better, because now we're now having more of a focus. Our jobs are now easier. We can now, make better, the company has a better focus overall. The reason I say this, if you remember, because I was saying something about Microsoft and all, was, Steve Ballmer made Microsoft peak at a particular point. He was all about Windows and sales and Windows and sales and licenses. Like, he could not see that the world was moving away from that era. And if Microsoft had continued like that, Microsoft would have gone to irrelevance. So then bringing Satya Nadella was probably the smartest move, in a long time. Putting someone who understands the technicality, someone who has coded. I think during the last build, Satya Nadella was talking about how his first time of coding in Visual Studio. This is the CEO of Microsoft talking about, coding and all of that. That tells you he understands it. So some of the things, we deal, believe it or not, you and I, software people, we're software people. To the outside world, what we do is pure voodoo, right? They don't understand any of it. So imagine having to explain to someone that YouTube is just more than just uploading video and people being able to watch it. There's a lot that goes under the hood. They can't really see that, but as technical people, we can have that discussion because we understand the layers or we understand like the depth of the complexity. Okay, so having someone at the helm like Microsoft who understands software development, understands what we do, makes the company make better decisions, has better vision. Satya Nadella came out and said, the focus now is cloud and mobile. A lot of journalists questioned that thought. They were like, what do you mean cloud and mobile? That Microsoft's core business is licenses, that they will go down and etc., etc. But the truth is, if you look at the trend, right, it's clear, right? The writing is on the wall. It's cloud and mobile services. So having that vision and being able to channel the company in that vision without having any doubt, without looking at what's our financials for this quarter, did we make profit and everything. When Microsoft was investing heavily on infrastructure, they were spending all that money and shareholders were questioning, why are you spending so much money on servers and all those kind of things? But it takes someone who has the vision, who knows the why, that can, stand firm and say, no, this has to happen. So what's going to happen? So to answer your question,
all your examples are software shops. Like okay. they make their money off of software. A lot of enterprise, a lot of companies, enterprises, whatever you want to call it, not all of them make their money off of software, but they need software in order to stand up their business. And so the reason why I say that is because you gave the example of the 0.01%.
Yeah.
And of course they're going to be the high performers. Of course they're going to be technical, but the thing is they lead software corporations. But your FedExes, your Home Depots, your Pet Supplies Plus, your JCPenney, they need software. They live and die by software, but they don't make their money by software directly. They require software to just operate.
That's an enabler.
Yeah, exactly. And so I hear your point. I think my original question was like, I forgot what my original question was, but it's something to the extent of, why is it so hard for mainstream organizations to model what appears to be proven, modeling Amazon, modeling Microsoft in regards to their cash cows, and yet the majority of organizations they ignore what makes these top performers successful, and they say they're looking for top-notch talent, but they're not willing to entertain and basically provide closure, for lack of a better term, for what top-notch talent needs in order for them to be top-notch in their organization. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to call myself top-notch, but I think I'm pretty good. But I know what it feels like to work in an organization where I feel like I have to dumb down my skills instead of doing my best work, and that sucks. So,
so let me make a prediction. Let me tell you what I think needs to happen. What needs to happen is software should not become. I think disasters need to happen so that people need to now realize that that would be what happens in software is the equivalent of somebody having a civil engineer work for them, right? Rather than employing a civil engineer firm to do their building for them. So yes, you could have an in-house civil engineer and say, oh, just quickly whip up this small building for me and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, that approach cannot scale. That approach is not sustainable. So disasters in software need to happen. When those disasters in software happen, what will now happen is we would now be forced to form guilds, essentially.
Yeah, that's what Uncle Bob was saying.
Yeah, we have to like form. It's already happening in Nigeria, believe it or not. What's happening in Nigeria now is that the development talent is so scarce that a lot of companies have suffered at the hands of bad software developers. In the past, we used to get developers from India and all those kind of things and pay them exorbitant prices. But ever since we entered the recession, that option too was cut off. So what ended up happening is they now started subcontracting their development to, should I say, software houses, right? Software houses that's all they do. They develop the application for you, and you have a contract with them to maintain that application. So what now started happening was, of course, there will be the bad software houses that do a bad job and all that. But what we're now seeing is that the really good ones are starting to rise to the top, okay? And they are starting to grow bigger and bigger to the point where they are now gaining more developers, training their developers, so on and so forth. Andela is one of them. So Andela is here I know it's also in the States as well, but it's here in Lagos. And what they do is they get people who have never coded before, teach them the entire JavaScript stack, mean stack. That's Mongo, Express, Angular, Node. Teach them everything end to end. Then they place them in companies, or they gather them together and take contracts from companies here in Nigeria. And they have like really good talent that oversees the work to make sure that the quality is top notch. I think until that happens, we are never going to be free from this perception that developers are like the grunts. You just bring them, they do the work, you pay them off, they walk away. Their own is just they are coding monkeys or something like that. So until catastrophes happen, and we now solidify into guilds or into companies, the same way we have construction firms, the same way we have law firms, to the point where the top law firms only pick top talent, and people who need good legal services go to the top law firms at whatever price the top law firms give them. So that needs to happen with software. That needs to happen with software, such that if a company wants, the same way most companies have lawyers though, but the in-house lawyers are not doing like the general litigation. They still have law firms that when serious litigation happens, they call those law firms, and those law firms do the defend them in court, not their in-house lawyer who is just looking at documents and making sure that they are okay and all those kind of things. So that may need to happen in software development, where the software developers who work with companies like your FedEx, your DHLs, they will just be people who are just there to do meager maintenance and stuff like that. But for the actual development and actual maintenance, that should go to some software shop who that's what they're focused, that's their specialization, and quality is what they care about. So that's what may need to happen. Similar to how you have defense contractors in the military who take jobs from the military and they focus on doing the right thing. So, for example, Boeing. Sorry, I know I'm rambling, but Boeing,
No,
for
no, no.
example,
I'm listening. I mean, I have a counter
what,
argument. My counter I'm sorry. So you're saying Boeing? I'm listening.
okay, so like Boeing, for example, now, when they take contracts from build fighter planes and all that, right? They have an agreement. Boeing has a reputation, and the US government trusts Boeing to say, okay, Boeing, or I can't remember who is, I think it's Lockheed Martin, and tell them, okay,
Northrop
we
Group.
need you to, yeah, we need you to build this F-35, you know, and Boeing will tell them, see, this has never been done before. So what will happen is we will work on it, and at the end of XYZ years, we'll give you a bill, you pay us, and that's it. So there's nothing like they have timelines, but their timelines are not strict. In fact, they push their timelines sometimes. So it's a contract, especially when you get to the edges of known technology, you know, places where they don't know, you know, it has never been done before. Like we hit that point a lot in software where they ask you to build something that has never been built before, and you don't know how long it's going to take. So, but
Yeah,
you know,
they ask you for an estimate.
exactly, that's like asking me to go somewhere and I don't know where I'm going to, but I should tell you how long it takes me to get there. It's like, dude, I may spend the whole day looking for my path to that place. So giving an estimate is just, you know, ridiculous. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to say, that software development has to grow to that maturity, such that developers like you and I would go and join a particular guild, we would follow their software practices, we would understand how things work, we would work our way to the top, and maybe if we are good enough, we may pull out and start our own software firms. That may need to happen.
You say guild.
Yeah.
Today, we just have consulting firms that pretty much are operated by, you know, recent college graduates, people that majored in communications and psychology, you know, mainstream mainstream college degrees that don't really go that far. Did I say that out loud? And so there's the reason I'm saying this is because these shops are the ones that are running or satisfying the needs of these companies, these corporations. These shops, I don't think, understand what goes into building sustainable software, but they have really cute voices. They, I need a filter. They, they have soft skills. They, 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 they understand human psychology. Hence, they're kind of like the opposite of your severely technical programmer, right? They're the face of software development, even though they know nothing about how to develop software. They just know how to write down requirements and ask you if you have a certain skill without really knowing what that skill is all about. So, what is the difference between this thing called this thing that you call a guild versus these consulting firms today, both in India and here in the States and wherever else in the world?
Okay, so my thought on it is you have to put things into perspective, right? So software development, like modern software development, has been around for maybe 20, 30 years tops, as opposed to engineering that has been around for hundreds of years, like 200 years. Same with law as well, 200, 300 years, and so on and so forth. So
Well,
if you,
I would say the Great Pyramids in Egypt, so I would say thousands. But yeah,
yeah, so um, you know, I think we should give it time. But what is happening now is that the demand for software is growing exponentially very quickly, and you know, software is becoming a part of our lives in a way we've not really seen before. And that expansion is happening so rapidly that nobody is even able to keep up, essentially. But what will happen is give it some time, give it another 40 years, another 50 years, and what you will find out is those consultancies would all die off.
I was going to say I'm not going to be here, but I'm listening.
Yeah, but like, you know, even extra 20, 30 years, right? You'll still be around the extra 20, 30 years. But my point is, at that point, right, software should have that, as if the singularity doesn't show up, but at that point, software should have matured to a point where, you know, it's not something anyone can do. For example, you can't just sit down in your backyard and become a nuclear physicist. That's not how it works. Yes, sir. To become a nuclear physicist, you have to go to school, you have to be trained, you have to go to like nuclear plants, you have to interact with equipment, you have to, you know, there's a lot that goes into it. It's heavily regulated. And before you can say, yes, this person is a nuclear physicist, there's a lot that goes into it. So software will need to get to that point where to become a software developer, I don't know what kind of code we'll be dealing with, but it would be so advanced. I think I've already seen a little bit of that with mobile development. It would be so advanced that, you know, even if you got someone out of the, you know, you just got a regular person that said, oh yeah, start, start learning how to develop mobile software, it will still take time. It will still take significant time to learn. So in fact, that idea of, you know, technology advancing so far that it takes a significant time to learn is what gave birth to universities. Okay, so it's just unfortunate that our own universities don't really teach us much in terms of software engineering. But I think software engineering will advance to a point where it may be so complicated that you need to, you know, be really schooled. You need to like be an apprentice under someone for you to really know it. You know, like chess, for example. Chess is a mental game, and you know, yes, it's possible to find someone who is such a genius that just sees a chess set and is as good, but the chances of that happening is so slim that, you know, almost exclusively the top chess players in the world are people who are mentored, who are, you know, nurtured by other top chess players in the world. So software development has to get to that level.
Okay. Today, anybody could say that they're a professional developer without really exhibiting or demonstrating professional skill sets, you know, professional, for lack of a better term, practices. But yeah, it's, you say that, you know, the demand is growing exponentially. Is the pay going to meet that type of demand?
Yes, it's a demand and supply thing. So yes, the pay will actually reach that demand, because if you think about it, every business, in fact, I like the way Richard Campbell puts it. I don't know, I have to say, you know, Richard Campbell from .NET Rocks, that guy is his wisdom just, you know, I don't know what to say. It dumbfounds me all the time, right? He says little snippets here and there that are like a result of thought-provoking and results of really deep, you know, thinking. You know, one of the things he said was that I've forgotten what that is. I've forgotten what he said. Let me see if I can remember. Just hold on. What were we talking about just now?
You were talking about Richard Campbell and how sharp he is.
Before that,
we were talking. I asked the question: if there's insatiable demand for building software, will the price of that grow for your developer?
Yeah. So I still can't remember, but I'll move on anyway. So yes, it will get to that point, because what will now happen is, yes, I remember, I remember what I wanted to say. What he said was that there are no banks, there are just software companies in the financial sector. Think about that. There are no banks. If you think about what a bank used to do before, was you carry your valuables. If it was jewelry and stuff, if it happened to be money, no problem. You gave it to them, they carried it, they put it in a box for you. That was banking. That is literally what a bank means. But today, what we have is just financial institutions that do, you know, software institutions, software companies that do switching and all those kind of stuff, you know, that are just in the financial sector. You get it? So we're getting to a world where every company will be a software company. It's just a matter of, oh, you're a software company that happens to move packages. You're a software company that happens to fly planes. You're a software company that happens to, do all those kind of stuff. So whether or not we like it, that's where the world is heading. And what that means is that software is going to, the demand for the software developer, or the software developer will play will play more and more a crucial role in every facet of the economy. And whether or not they get the right person, that work needs to be done. So if they get the wrong person, and over time they now notice that, getting the wrong people is just, keeps failing us, the demand for the people who know what they're doing will be insane. Let me give you an example. In my company, we do a lot of stuff like, financial services and all those kind of stuff. So we needed a mobile developer. Okay, I do mobile development, but that's not my role in the company. So we have we have just one mobile developer who is really good. He uses Xamarin. He knows how to do native Android. He knows how to do native iOS. He's a solid guy. And he had an accident in his bike because he likes to ride a power bike. So he had an accident with his hand, and I think his right hand was bandaged. Is talking about boss factor. So because of it, the company has been looking for a replacement for the past 2-3 months, and they've not found a single person that can take his role. That's how important the guy is. You understand? So it's only going to get worse. It's not going to, you and I know it's not going to get any better.
Well, in Miami, they'll just say, oh, you're too expensive. We have this other guy that's willing to do it for like a third of what you're asking for. And I'm like, well, that's because he needs, you're giving him experience, so he's doing it for really cheap. And so in Miami, they just hire and fire until they deplete the entire budget, when they could just hire someone that knows how to do it and charges them for the amount of time and effort that they have spent investing in their craft. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
I think
I'm almost done with Miami, man. This city's pissing me off. This city is a freaking, I don't know if you do like strip clubs. This city is nothing but a lap dance. It teases you. It makes you want to do things that you can't do, but it flaunts it all over you, man. It just rubs all over your lap, and you're like, oh, I can't take it anymore. But they don't want to break bread with you, man. The city does not want to break bread. So I'm sorry for being graphic. I don't think that was too graphic.
No, it wasn't too graphic. Okay. I think what needs to happen is in Florida is they need, companies need to do that for the next 4, 5, 6 years. So they now realize that this is not the way to go. We need expertise, and at that point, by the time they bring you back to the negotiating table, you would have the upper hand. What's going to happen? I strongly believe it, because all the factors, all the indicators are pointing in that direction. The demand for good skill is rising, and the ability to acquire that good skill is getting steeper and steeper. In the past, it used to be that, I don't know if you've heard Scott Hanselman say, he said that once upon a time, if you knew how to do tables in HTML, you had a job. Because most websites were just HTML tables, period. So, but now it's way, past that. There are a lot of skills you need to know, and that is not to become any easier, or it's not getting any better, essentially.
Yeah. The last part is well, your typical consulting firms, in which I described, that have cute voices, they're people. They don't really understand technology, but their responsibility is to place technologists with companies to satisfy their vision. Are they going to? Do you think they're going to persist for the next 20 years, or do you think that there's a disruptor that's waiting, that's imminent? Because I would love to remove them from the equation.
Oh, they won't even see it coming. Trust me. They won't see it coming when it starts to happen. You know, what's going to happen is you will have more things like Andela, where it's a software firm who believes in quality, who does the right thing, and they will start winning more contracts that they will become a household name, you know, even among like conglomerates and all, to the point where if you are not on their level in terms of output, you know, there is nothing you say to them that's going to make them that's going to make companies, you know, believe you. In fact, that's one of the problems with starting your own. You know, lawyers have that problem too. Starting your own law firm. Yes, you could be like the brightest lawyer in the world, but if you're not like tied to a really prestigious law firm, it will be very difficult to convince, you know, companies of your competence. You know, it's unless over time you've won big cases and all before they not say, okay, yes, we can actually trust these people with our legal something. Because if you think about it, legal, you know, software is as important as, you know, legal work, legal profession. Because if you have a shoddy law firm, you know, you could be sued into the ground. Your company could not exist. If you have a shoddy software team, your company drive your company into the ground in the same fashion. So it will happen. You will see. It will happen. And what will happen is, you know, at first, yes, these ones with sweet voices, they will come. You know, there's something we in Nigeria we call it bobo. Bobo is like saying, like, to deceive somebody, to give someone BS. That's to bobo someone. So yes, they will come and bobo the what do they call them? Bobo the companies and the HR firms and whatever the case may be, and that will work for a period of time. Then after a while, it will just stop. You know, like for example, Nigerians that like to send emails in the past, Nigerian prince and all this kind of stuff. Yeah,
I got one a couple days ago. Excuse me.
Yeah, he used to work at first, but after a while, everybody just knew that their jig was up. So, you know, now everybody is aware that if someone sends you an email and it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. You know, and that's going to happen with all those firms. You know, people who are in software but have no justification to be doing software projects. That's what's going to happen to them also, is that you will find out that companies will start to sniff, will start to detect their BS, and they won't go far. They won't go far. Just give it another 10, 15 years, you'll see.
Yeah. That's too long for me.
Yeah.
I think I have like another maybe 8 years of my career before I tap out. So,
but one thing you should also think of is why don't you you know, just start your own consultancy or something, like start your guild essentially.
One is I can't convince people that I respect technically to join me, because the people I tend to respect technically usually are also of the entrepreneurial spirit. So they have their own vision, right? The other part is that's the biggest one, is trying to build a shop of people that I know is competent, and even if they don't know something, they could be a beast in whatever technology within 12 months, because I know that they're motivated and they'll figure it out. But those people that I respect, they're kind of just like me. They have their own dream, you know. They don't want to satisfy someone else's dream. They want to bring their own dream, to light.
This is how you should go about it, because that's what I want to do myself. How you should go about it is start a meetup, right? Start a meetup, start, something, right? Maybe a get together, a hangout. Get people who don't know anything about software. People who are completely fresh off the boat, in quotes. People who have, they are eager and hungry to learn about software, but they don't have any experience whatsoever. get those people, teach them, show them the way, whether it's meetups or whatever, give them guidance. And once they start to look up to you, it's easy to convince them to join your guild. In fact, it will be natural for them to be part of your guild. That was what happened in the early days of martial arts, right? In the early days of martial arts, what happened was everybody had their own fighting styles. So when someone invented a new fighting style that was really good, what the person would do was to set up a dojo, bring people in who have a drive to become good martial artists. Bring them in, train them in that's your style, in the ways you've learned, right? And and all of a sudden you now have a dojo. A dojo is where people come in to train to become good in a particular skill, whether it's taekwondo, whether it's karate, whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or whatever the case may be. So I think that's what you will find out, that it is much more easier to cultivate people or work with people that you have raised, as opposed to, like you said, working with other people who are either as good as you or better than you. That may be impossible to do. But if you can start a meetup or something, because there are people who are really hungry for knowledge, if you can pick out like the smart ones, the ones who learn very quickly, and nurture them, mentor them, then that way you could have your own guild, such that once you go out and you get a job, all of you can sit down and say, okay, let's see how we would architect a system from scratch. This is what we work on, and so on and so forth. Over time, right? I won't say that they are indebted to you because they could leave and do whatever they want to do, but that sense of culture, because what we're talking about is culture here. That sense of culture will persist. So even if they left you and went to do their own thing, they would probably do those things the way you are doing it. So I think that's the solution.
I mean, that's probably at least the 3-year investment of people that come out the woodwork, know nothing about programming, and then get them up to speed.
Yeah. It might not take up to 3 years, because, for example, the guys I'm teaching, I teach every Saturday. So the people I teach, maybe one of these days I'll try and record some of the videos and put it on YouTube or something. But the people I teach, they started from absolutely nothing. They knew absolutely nothing of web development. They were just savvy with Windows operating system, command line, and all that, but they knew nothing about web development, C# or anything. So I literally took them from scratch. And it has been an experience. It's not been up to a month now. Okay, let's say like 3-4 months it has been so far. And we're already working as a group on our project, because there's a project we're working on. Let me show you. It's Vamia. That's the name of the project on GitHub. I'll put it, let me paste it here so you see. So that's something that we're all working on together. I will just do a little bit of it. They will now send me pull requests, and they have intellectual freedom to do whatever they like. Send pull requests, we look at it, we review it together, and so on. And what's happening now is that I find it even easier to inculcate the right behavior of, okay, you need to write unit tests, you need to what's the word? You need to build. You need to properly understand your domain. You need to come up with, coming at it from a domain-driven design perspective, and all those other stuff that is difficult to do if you have someone who has built his own experience before. So I think, you should really look at doing something like that, because that's how, all these guilds in quotes start. Because by the time you have 3, 4, 5 of those kind of guys that understand how you work,
Sorry, I'm listening.
You have your own culture, you have your own style. It's easy for you guys to form a guild and get jobs and execute the jobs properly, get timelines and all that. So yeah, that may be the solution. That may be the way out.
I'll definitely marinate on it. So, I'm getting sick. I'm getting ready to tap out. I really enjoyed you accepting my invitation, man. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's just it's just unfortunate that the workload on me has been incredible over the past few months, but it's starting to reduce. So hopefully, my blog is starting to get stale with content. But very soon, my involvement will soon pick up.
When's the last time you updated your blog?
That was a while. When I was talking about F# 4.1 tooling, the new .NET Core tooling for F#.
Got it.
That's been a while. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again. Is there anything else you want to broadcast? You're not doing videos, are you?
I did a few, but yeah, I have a channel. I have a YouTube channel. I think maybe I should just paste the link to that.
Yeah, I'll subscribe to it.
Yeah,
I just reached. I hit 100 subscribers like 2-3 days ago, which is surprising. Which was surprising because last time I had checked, I had like 80, and then I looked, I had like 100. I'm like, I don't remember putting out that many videos because I took a hiatus. I don't know how to say the word. I had took a break from everything. So I don't know. It's kind of motivating. And I had Michael Feathers on my channel last week. You know who Michael Feathers is, right? Michael Feathers is the author of Refactoring Legacy Code or something like that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I've heard so many things about that book.
Yeah. I never bought his book, but don't tell him that. But I had like an hour discussion with him last week. It was pretty cool. So, all right,
awesome. I'll check it out too. So, I've pasted a link to the YouTube channel. It's letscode.net. So, what I intend to do is so that, because like I told you, there are people who I'm teaching from scratch who have never coded before. So in order not to repeat myself over and over again, I'm looking at creating short videos that teach a specific thing, whether it's running an application in .NET or setting up Git or setting up all those kind of stuff, so that if someone asks me how do I do X, I can just refer them to the video rather than repeating myself over and over again. So that's where I'm putting all my stuff. It's just I've not had time to update it recently, but I will.
Yeah. I promise I'm terminating this conversation. But like one of the motivating factors for me doing a technical blog and also videos is so that I can capture or I could document my understanding of something that I was recently studying, a new technology, programming language, framework, library, etc. And to this day, there's shops that still want me to take like some programming tests. I'm like, why don't you just go to my blog? You see all the programming you want. Go to my GitHub. You'll see some over there too. Like, why do you want me to take your test? Like, I'm putting all this information out. I've maintained a blog for like over 2 years. Like, if you really want to know if I'm competent in C# or .NET, like visit my blog. That's the reason. It's for you. But they don't understand that language though.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
No, they don't.
All right. I'm done, Betsy. Thanks, Odie. I really appreciate it. If there's anything else you'd like to say it right now, or else I'm going to hit the stop broadcast.
I'm good.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. I'm hitting it.